Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Hank, and I'm with OPWDD. I want to extend my appreciation to all of our workforce and training and talent development people here who have helped us facilitate and put together this webinar series. Today is the first of an ongoing series of webinars that are being provided to you, Medicaid service coordinators in particular, to assist in the transition to the care coordination health homes under People First Care Coordination. And our sessions will be happening twice a month. The second and fourth Wednesday of each month at noon, we'll be holding these half-hour presentations. The good news is that the webinars will be recorded and posted on the OPWDD website for those of you who want to watch it over again, or for those who can't join us at the live session at noon. It's also important to point out to you that the info sessions will count toward the current required annual professional development hours for MSCs. Today, we're going to launch the series with People First Care Coordination, what MSCs need to know, and your presenters today will be Kate Bishop, the Director of Program Development in the Division of Person-Centered Supports here at OPWDD, and Amanda Harper, who is the Assistant MSC Statewide Coordinator. So Kate, thank you, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you all for participating today. We really want to welcome you, and thank you for taking your lunch hour to listen and learn and hear a bit more about our transition to CCOs. As Diane mentioned, this is really an opportunity, the first of several sessions that will be focused on learning about the MSC transition, and we want to let you know that some of the information that you're hearing today, if you've been attending the MSC supervisor conferences or other forums, could be somewhat duplicative, but we also want to make sure that we're repeating the information for people who may not have heard it before, that you're hearing things consistently over time, and that you're getting information that is the most current and the current status of where we are in the transition and planning. So we want to start today with a few Mythbusters. We started hearing over the summer and into the fall a lot of questions and concerns from MSCs and provider agencies and families where there was a thought that certain things were happening in the system that just were not really accurate. So I wanted to begin today by explaining some of those things and some of the things that we heard as concerns, and hopefully setting the record straight once and for all about them. So first was the thought that the MSC job would just go away and that now there'd be a whole new bunch of people coming in to work for CCOs. And we just want to be clear that that is not at all the expectation. In fact, we need you all, and we're counting on you all being part of this transition. We need your experience and your knowledge base and your relationships with people to ensure that we have continuity as we embark on this systems change. So jobs are not being eliminated, they're just changing. So instead of being a Medicaid service coordinator, people will be taking on the new role of a care manager, and that will be happening over time. Secondly, there was a lot of concern from people early on that the new care management model would mean that caseloads were going to go up to 100 people that you'd be responsible for, and that there would be an expectation that you'd be able to monitor, manage, and support people up to very, very high numbers. And that also is not accurate. The current model has a requirement at the highest tier of a 1-to-20 ratio. But if you listened to Kate Marley yesterday talking about the transition plan, you heard that we're looking to offer flexibility for the CCOs to develop appropriate ratios relative to the person's needs and the structure and the organization of the new CCO entities, and that we're allowing some flexibility and latitude there. But overall, the expectation is not for extremely high caseloads, and we expect that the current standards will be met, and then flexibility will be applied to meet people's needs based on their needs. Third is the issue of qualifications. There was concern that initially that in order to be a care manager, people would need a master's degree, and that is also not the case. So the qualifications are going to include the opportunity for people who have been in active MSC, Medicaid Service Coordinator roles, to be able to transition based on that experience into the care management roles. Future qualifications will be a bit higher with a bachelor's level requirement. However, for those people who have been working in the field and have demonstrated those skills of service coordination, they will be qualified to transition into the new care management role. And lastly, one of the major concerns that we hear from people in the field and some families has been that the focus will all be on medical care and the model will be only a medical model. And also that is not accurate. The person-centered practices and the delivery and the customization of support models and truly applying that person-centered standard for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is at the core of the CCO model. So it's expected that those person-centered practices will be driving the way that support plans are developed and supports are delivered for individuals who are receiving services, and that it is not a transition into a medical model of care. However, that said, there is an expectation that as you're looking at the person and helping support them in their life needs, that you're not ignoring the health or behavioral health needs that a person might have, and that those needs and the services associated with meeting those needs are part of what becomes coordinated through the new care coordination model and the care management role. So it isn't only focusing on medical, but is certainly ensuring that for people who have health and behavioral health needs, that that's part of the planning process and that's incorporated into the plan development. So OPWDD remains committed to ensuring that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities receive supports that are person-centered, flexible, easy to access, and responsive to their needs and preferences. And again, that demonstrates a high reliance on using person-centered practices, and the experience that the system has had overall, the OPDD system, is built on helping people be supported in the most person-centered way possible. So the goal of this system change and the development of the CCOs is to empower that, to have people who are in a coordination role have the skills, have the capabilities, have the tools to enhance that person-centered practice. We also have a commitment to advance our system to provide high-quality outcomes based on systems of support that includes health and wellness, preparing for a transition to managed care. And as people are learning more about the CCOs and are going to read the applications and then read the transition plan, you'll see that over time, as we've been talking about for several years now, our system will be transitioning into a managed care environment. The CCO in building capacity and building infrastructure and building organizational readiness within the CCO model will help prepare for that transition in a way that will ease that transition and help the system be ready for the kinds of changes that are coming. And I'll just make reference here to, as a system of providers, of stakeholders, of people engaged in supports for people with developmental disabilities, the system has changed over the years, and that's part of our history. I've been working in the system for over 30 years now and have seen the system change from an institutional model of support into a community-based model that really developed group home options for people, community residential options for people, but didn't have a strong sense of community or family support. So it was either you're in certified settings or you're not getting those supports. And then those services were added, and we've done a lot over the last years to build a community support model that allows supports to families, and shows reimbursement methodologies for community services in a way that was an expansion from the certified setting model. And this change, the CCO change and the shift into a stronger coordination system is the next change that needs to occur in order to ensure that we're building the strong system foundations for even more flexibility and more opportunities for people who are supported through the IDD system. So what are the goals of People First Care Coordination? The goals really relate to enhancing a person-centered planning and focus on outcomes in our system. And as you all know, because you do a great deal of planning and working with individuals receiving services and their families and their providers of service, developing a plan is only step one to really achieving anything that's really important to the person who's receiving services. It's really about the outcome of that plan and the services that are in place for the person that really results in the change and the realization of a quality of life for the person who's receiving supports and services. So as we move into People First Care Coordination, the intention isn't just to look at the fact that there is a plan and there are services in place for the person, but to be able to effectively determine that that plan and those services are actually meeting the needs of the person in the way that that person wants to be supported. We're also creating a foundation of person-centered planning for the specialized DD managed care. And just to reiterate what I said before, our goal is to build a strong infrastructure that's going to help us be ready for that transition into managed care. We need to build a strong foundation that includes IT systems to support how information is shared, how it's stored, how it's reported, so that there's clarity of information coming to providers, coming to the state, and being able to be accessed by the person receiving services. We don't have that today, and in order to move into the future, we need to build those foundations so that we have that information necessary to help people ensure that we're achieving the goals that are most important to people. We will eliminate the conflict of interest, and you all know that over the years we've worked within a variety of structures that are defined in the waiver to separate out the coordination function from the service delivery function. So, you know, you'll be familiar with there having been different supervisory chains. Well, that really wasn't enough. You know, we went to the federal government to make that case that, gee, we really are operating in a conflict-free environment because of those separations and firewalls. And if you read the regulation that comes from the federal government, you'll see that that really was not enough to meet the standard that was expected of us. So these new entities coming on board as care coordination organizations will eliminate that conflict of interest because there will be separate organizations focused on coordination of services and planning, and separate organizations that are actually delivering the supports and services. So that eliminates any potential conflict and brings us into compliance with the federal standard. We're also incorporating a person services into a single life plan overseen by a care manager. So what does that mean? It's the incorporation of the health and behavioral health services that I spoke of earlier. It's also looking at the supports in place for a person that bring the safeguard needs of that person into one incorporated plan. I can think over the years to so many times when there have been differences in the safeguards developed perhaps in a residential setting or in a day program support model, and where things went awry because there wasn't a consistent approach to how the person would be supported across their living settings, across their life activities, which has led over time in some instances to negative outcomes for that person. So the goal of having a life plan that's really integrated and is built into an IT system and will allow the opportunity for clearer and more timely communication to all those involved in the supports for the person who's receiving services will help to achieve stronger quality approaches to delivering the most up-to-date, person-centered life plan for that individual, and to incorporate the supports that are most effective and most appropriate for that person across the various areas of their life, rather than have them compartmentalized by various program models. Because remember, our goal is to be truly person-centered. Our goal is to build the supports around the needs and interests of the person, not the program model that the person is perhaps attending. We are also looking for ways within the People First Care Coordination to incentivize performance. So you'll see, if you look through the transition plan, you're going to see some examples, and Amanda will talk of this as we move forward. You'll see some examples of what that life plan looks like, what's different about the current ISP and the life plan, so that you'll begin to get a better sense of what those expectations will be as we move forward into People First Care Coordination. And one of the things that is added to the life plan will be the use of outcome measures, personal outcome measure domain areas for people, so that there's a clear relationship to the supports and services that are being chosen by and implemented into the support plan for the person that relate back to the outcome area that is of greatest interest to the person receiving supports and services. It'll also give us a more consistent way to measure performance. Are we achieving those outcomes? Are the supports in place for the person, in fact, achieving the things that are most important to that person? If we don't consistently identify those particular areas or outcomes, we'll have no real way of making those measurements. So this new system will allow for consistency. It'll allow for a way for us to evaluate performance and then ultimately incentivize performance, so that the things that are most desired by the people receiving supports and services and quality outcomes that are important to ensure quality of the overall system of support are the things that ultimately are incentivized. The activities of the People First Care Coordination will continue to keep the same level of family involvement as exists today. We know that family involvement and including families as the support givers, as the advocates, is so important to ensure quality and opportunity for people who are receiving supports and services. So the People First Care Coordination, in line with the person-centered planning expectations that are defined in our system, include and continue that level of family involvement for people who are receiving supports and are assisted by advocates that are family members. There's also an opportunity within the implementation phase to develop and train MSCs as care managers. So we know that there's more things that will be occurring, and this list that you've just listened to me speak about will include opportunities to learn new things, to develop new skills, to identify areas that are important in the planning for people receiving services that relate to their health and behavioral health. So to that end, and you'll be learning more as we do more of these information sessions, you'll be hearing more about the training that will be required and the learning objectives that will be developed for the CCOs to be able to ensure that you all are given the tools and the skills to become effective care managers and to meet these expectations that we're defining as we move towards systems change. So you hear many terms related to care coordination, and and I can't promise that there won't be even other terms used, because we've used different terms over time, and sometimes those terms are interchangeable and can be a little bit confusing to people. But just to be sure that you're understanding, when we speak of People First Care Coordination, that really equates to the delivery of care management through care coordination organizations. So those are the same things, and the model that is used to implement care coordination organizations are the IDD health homes. And health homes are not a building, as I'm sure you've heard before, but it's really a new organization. It's a new entity in the system, that is responsible for ensuring a connected team of health and human service providers that coordinate care for Medicaid-eligible people with chronic conditions. So the IDD Health Home is a new health home model that's being developed in partnership with the Department of Health and overseen by the Department of Health, but with a specialized IDD focus that builds on the supports and services within our system, OPWDD system, and is defined and developed as through stakeholder engagement and participation of people who have a history within the OPWDD system. So it's very specialized and includes all the expectations on person-centered practices and knowledge and understanding of people with developmental disabilities that's different from some of the other health homes that are in our system today. The health home also allows for an opportunity to receive some additional federal funding, and that federal funding, it's an increased match in the federal funding, and that is how we will be able to build the infrastructure that I spoke about earlier. It's costly to implement new IT systems and to develop different payment scales for the coordination activities that are underway. So the health home model is a way to bring revenue to the state to build that infrastructure and to support the systems change that I've been talking about so far. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline and where we are today and where we're headed. So the draft application was published in June, and you'll see in this slide the checkbox mean, yep, that actually happened and is completed. The application was published. People had an opportunity to review prior drafts or to review that draft and give input, and the application was updated as a result of stakeholder input. In the summer of 2017, the state plan amendment and the 1115 waiver application was submitted, and you've been able to see and be able to review those applications so that you can become familiar with the specific nature of the applications for both the CCO and the 1115 waiver. And then in October, based on the feedback from the June draft publication, we issued the final application so that entities who were desiring to be CCOs, People First Care Coordination, would be able to submit a final application for consideration to be identified as a CCO. So on December 1st, those applications were due, and we have received, and you will hear from Amanda some specifics on that, but we have received applications for CCOs during the course prior to that December 1 date. So what's coming next? Well, we're in the process now, between December and February, of completing the state review of those applications so that there can be approvals for who can act as a CCO health home as we implement that. The readiness activities will follow shortly thereafter and will be able to be completed between the time period of February and June, so that all of the things that will allow for actual implementation of the CCO will be able to be achieved as a result of those readiness activities. And then we are on track for a July 1, 2018 start date for CCO health homes to actually begin implementing the new CCO model. So how will that transition take place? And I really encourage you to look closely at the transition plan, because there's a great amount of detail, and hopefully you were able to listen to Kate Marley's presentation yesterday, but if not, that presentation is going to be or is already posted on our website so that people can go review it. If you listen to it once, if you have questions, I encourage you even to perhaps listen to it again or jump to certain sections that are of greater interest to you. The more you can educate yourself on how we're moving forward, the more prepared you will be for this transition. So people receiving OPWDD services will transition to a CCO in their region. All all people receiving services will have a care manager and a team to rely on right from the start. So there will be no gap in services as people transition from MSC into CCO. Provider agencies will be part of one or more CCOs. So while every MSC agency needs to have an affiliation and relationship to only one CCO, which is part of the planning, provider agencies may serve people who receive coordination support through various CCOs. So that's a difference that you need to be aware of. We expect there to be no interruption in services as this transition takes place. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who's going to go through a few final slides.
And then we will get to questions. Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Kate has mentioned, there are several documents that are available for your review that will help to outline the expectations for the upcoming CCO health homes, and in doing so will also help to detail what the future of care coordination is going to look like. So we would really, really like to encourage everybody to take some time to review the documents that are available. The MSC advisory number 20-17 was shared this week, and it had the registration for the info session that everyone's attending today. So hopefully you were able to review that advisory and see the references that were made to both the application and the transition plan. So first, with the CCO health home application, again, we'd just like to encourage people to read it, that there's important areas of focus for service coordinators, that page 20 really outlines the minimum standards and requirements for the health home life plans. So that'll be that person-centered service plan, the transition from the ISP to the life plan, that those minimum standards are outlined, and that can be very helpful to you to read through that. There's also the care manager qualifications, as Kate has spoken about, with the transition of current service coordinators, but also what the qualification requirements are going to be going forward. There's also the skill building areas for care coordinators, so that's a great, for care managers, excuse me. So that's a great tool on page 28 to look through that outlines the 10 areas of competencies for care managers. So it'd be very beneficial to look through these documents. They are large, so we try to help to break it down with some of the specific areas of relevance to look through and try to understand, and after reviewing, reach out and ask questions that you might have. Next, the transition plan. As Kate said, this was published, the draft was published for public comment on 12/5, and that will be open for public comment until January 5th. So we encourage you to review and submit any comments that you might have on the document. And again, it was pointed out in the advisory some areas of focus within the transition plan that might help to further explain this transition. Overall, the plan is anticipated timeframes associated with the CCO health home application process. It also outlines individual family education and outreach activities that will be completed to help the families and individuals through this transition, and staff preparation for the initiation of the CCO health home services. So the advisory does point out some areas to make sure that you review within that transition plan to help to further answer questions that you might have after today's info session. And okay, so lastly, and this is also available through the OPWDD webpage, that the status of potential CCO health homes. So this is great information for people to have to gain a better understanding of who these care coordination organizations are going to be. That during the draft application public comment period in June, OPWDD received letters of interest from 6 entities. Those are available on the website. If you go to OPWDD's website and the People First Care Coordination page, and you look at the CCO health home application, it takes you to the DOH website, which is going to provide for you several documents, and there is information about the letters of interest. So you can see the CCOs that at this time have shown interest, that there are at least 2 CCOs per region at this time that have been identified, and 10 CCO applications were submitted and are now under review. So we encourage you to look at those. There's also a map available that helps you to understand within your region who is available, so that you can speak with your agency about the CCOs that would be in communication with your agency. And lastly, on December 27th, we will have our session number 2. So today was info session 1. On the 27th will be our second info session. It's titled, What is a CCO Health Home? Comprehensive Care Management, and how is it different from the work of today's MSC. So we encourage that people go to the link that's provided below to register for this info session. There has been some information that's been repeated today that people may have heard before, but the topics will continue to get more in-depth into care coordination and the role of the care manager, so we encourage continued participation. All right, so now we will be able to ask some of the questions that have come up through the Q&A in the WebEx.
Okay. One of the first questions we had was, how will the individuals we work with transition to the CCO health home?
That's a great question. So there will be an opportunity for people who are receiving services today to get some education about the health homes and the available opportunities within their region, and you will be working with them, and we'll have more detail about exactly how and when you will be able to reach out and discuss some of those options with people. You'll see more detail on that in the transition plan, but the expectation will be that individuals will be making an informed consent, and that they will decide how they want to receive their coordination. So that will occur, and then that will occur with a smooth transition into the new model, so that it'll be known ahead of time, and people will not have an interruption in the coordination service. Everyone will kind of land in a new entity for their coordination based on the transition plan and the communication associated with it.
Okay. Can you go into just a high level about what services will be available to the individuals in the CCO health home, and will it affect self-directed services?
Okay. Another great question, and I know that question has come up before. So we have no expectation that there will be a change to the services that people are receiving as a result of this transition. The current services that people have in their ISPs today will carry over into the new CCO and the life plan. Through planning processes, services can change just as they do today, but there will be no change as a result of this transition. With specific reference to self-direction, self-direction will remain with the care coordination as one of the entities as part of a planning team for people who are choosing self-direction, who's taking the lead in the coordination role. However, the broker services and the fiscal intermediary services that are part of the overall development of a self-directed plan will remain in the service delivery environment. So just as an MSC works with a broker and an FI today to assist a person who's choosing to self-direct their supports, the care manager will work with the broker and the fiscal intermediary for people in the new care coordination model.
Thank you. Okay. Oftentimes, providers have had minimal contact with service coordinators until now. What support will be in place to help guide medical providers and care coordinators in the responsibility to maintain communication and work together?
That's a really great question. The opportunity to build some of those relationships and build some network capacity is really part of what will help us ultimately plan for a transition into managed care. So as providers are working to ensure that they develop those relationships and strengthen the relationships with existing medical health and behavioral health providers, it'll help strengthen the foundation for future planning and systems change. But you're right, there will be a learning curve. There'll be a learning curve for the CCO entities. There'll be a learning curve for the health and behavioral health providers. And we will be looking for ways to enhance and develop stronger communication strategies, training strategies, and best practice approaches to achieve a better ultimate system that incorporates opportunities for people to have stronger health and behavioral health supports within the system of care.
Thank you, Kate. How should MSCs plan for and communicate with individuals about continuity of care during this transition?
I think that's another great question. Continuity of care is something that we expect will be very important to people who are receiving supports and services and their families. So in many instances, one of the benefits to this new approach and the transition plan and the planning around the development of CCOs is that through affiliations with the existing providers of MSC services, in many instances, some of those relationships can be maintained. So the opportunity for continuity is certainly assisted in that process. One of the other opportunities for individuals, though, may be that they don't want the same continuity and they want to change. That opportunity for change will also be available to them. So, it's going to depend on the person and where they're coming from and what they're looking for, but the opportunity to maintain relationships is more achievable in this model and this transition plan than could have been the case, so we're really pleased for that.
I know that Amanda spoke to this, but can you just reiterate, how should MSCs plan for and communicate with individuals? Oh, I'm sorry. How can MSCs find out more about how to become a care manager, connect with the CCO health home, qualifications, caseload expectations, job expectations, and responsibilities with their new job, and about the current MSCs partnering with CCO health homes?
Right, well, that's another great question, and I've got several answers with regard to that. So first, we want to make sure that you are educating yourselves and educating your organizations through reviewing the information that's available on the website, reviewing the transition plan, reviewing the application. We're working here through these informational sessions that Diane Hank spoke of with our workforce and talent development to make sure that there's clarity around where we're headed and what some of the areas of focus will need to be through these information sessions. But very, very importantly is that relationship with your own organization today and the CCOs that are emerging, because we know that because the applications have been submitted, that the vast, vast majority of current MSC entities are now affiliated with the emerging CCOs. So information sharing and education from the CCOs will be taking place to help you know what to expect during the course of this transition. So it's through all of those activities that you will become informed of and knowledgeable about your new roles and how the transition will be taking place, timelines for how that transition is taking place, where you will be kind of landing as becoming a care manager as you move into the future system that is being developed and implemented throughout the state.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Can you explain the change with PCSS and explain a little bit more about the opt-out option?
Sure. So PCSS will no longer be an option. It won't be part of the waiver services. So all people will be eligible to be supported with their coordination needs through a CCO health hub. However, we know there could be instances where someone does not want the comprehensive care management that you receive through the CCO health home and may make a choice to opt out of that. It is a voluntary program, so it's not something that people are forced to participate in. So for those people who choose to opt out, and you'll see this information and some of the comparisons across the different options for people within the transition plan, but the option to opt out is pretty much accepting a standard kind of basic level of coordination that is more comparable to the PCSS service that was available through the waiver, had been available through the waiver over time. And it doesn't have all the bells and whistles and comprehensive care management and the incorporation of the health and behavioral health supports and coordination that we are envisioning within the CCO health home. So I encourage you to take a closer look at the transition plan and the specific information relative to the opt-out option for people to take advantage of.
What IT system will be used, and will choices still be used? Part of that.
There will be some elements where choices remains active, and there will be some specific information shared with you on exactly what those expectations will be. Choices will not house the ISP in the same way that it does today, but Choices is used for other communication between providers and the state, so there will be some things that remain in place and other things that will shift. Each CCO will be required to meet a certain IT standard, and they need to develop and identify an IT structure to house the life plan and to include, store, and be able to share certain data as defined by the state. So those IT systems are being identified by the CCOs in relationship to what the state has set as a standard for delivering the health home service and the life plan expectations within the CCO model.
Thank you. Will there be informational pamphlets to share with families to explain this transition?
Informational pamphlets. That's a good idea.
On the website.
There's one on the website now.
The People First Care Coordination brochure is available on the website. If you go to OPWDD, the OPWDD website, there is on the People First Care Coordination webpage a brochure. There's also a webinar that was held by the commissioner that also is targeted to families that could be useful for them to watch.
Okay, so there is that brochure. There will also be a letter that will explain things to individuals and families that will be forthcoming, that will be helpful to ensure that people are getting all the information they need to make the decisions that they need to make.
Where can information on the timeline for the transformation be found, and is this a steadfast timeline?
Yes, this is our timeline, and the information can be found in the transition plan. It's very clearly laid out. The first steps, which is to get to the phase 1 implementation for care coordination, and then ultimately phase 2 and phase 3, which is the transition and move into the managed care environment, first voluntary and then later mandatory. All those phases are laid out in the transition plan, and again, I encourage you to listen to Kate Marley's fabulous presentation yesterday, and it is available online, and it does lay out those specific steps and phases and timelines for those transitions.
We'll also be presenting Thursday evening at 5:30, and there is a link to register for that if folks want to participate in the Thursday evening presentation.
Great. If you didn't hear that, I'll repeat it. There will be a Thursday presentation as well at 5:30, another WebEx, and that is available for you to sign up for so that you can hear it directly in real time, or you can listen to the recorded version from yesterday. But that information is available in the transition plan.
How will the CAF be used by care managers?
Another great question. The CAF is used as a tool to identify the person's interests, strengths, and needs for the purposes of care planning at this juncture. We're in the process of implementing it system-wide. There have been over 19,000 people assessed now, but that CAF information and the support needs for the individual will be part of what is used when it's available to develop the person-centered plan. Over time, as the entire system is assessed, that information will be used to begin to establish determinations about the relative need levels of individuals within our system and the acuity of people who are receiving supports and services. Ultimately, and you'll see in the application, the transition of the role associated with completing ongoing assessments, meaning reassessments after the initial assessment by the state, will be the responsibility of the care coordination organizations. So that will be something that will be shifting to the CCOs over time. But the CAF is used for the purpose of person-centered planning and ultimately to begin to identify relative needs based on a person's strengths and functional needs.
HAB plans today, how will HAB plans and HAB providers work with care managers, and how will those plans be incorporated into the life plan?
Great, that's another great question, and HAB plans today are developed through a person-centered planning process as defined within the person-centered planning reg, and typically would include the participation of the coordinator, the people who are receiving habilitative services, whether it's day HAB, res HAB, community HAB, and those support plans are put together in a way that is part of the person-centered planning process. We know that there are places where there are tremendous best practices that occur and result in very, very person-centered habilitation plans. But we also know that there are some instances when those habilitation plans may not be as best practice as we'd like to see them be, as you all might like to see them be. So one of the positive elements of the shift into this new system, and you're going to learn more about it as we move into more informational sessions, particularly the life plan, is that those habilitation goals are set as part of the person-centered planning process and will be housed within the life plan, and they'll be housed within the IT system in the life plan, so that the goal of ensuring that the habilitative supports and the goals and the plans developed as a result of that relate back to the personal outcome areas that are most important to the individual receiving services are meant to be maximized and enhanced. So one of the differences will be that rather than have plans just attached to an ISP as kind of a separate standalone thing that's stapled to the current paper plan, those HAB plans will be included in the IT system and will be integrated into the overall life plan of the person, which we anticipate will build stronger person-centered HAB plans ultimately through this new expectation and the accountability of building it into a system such as the life plan and the IT system that supports the life plan.
How will the Council on Quality Leadership personal outcome measures be used in the life plan?
So another good question, and you'll see as you look at the examples of the life plan, right now what our expectation is, and we've really through the BIP grants invested a great deal of resource to help build capacity around the CQL personal outcome measures so that coordinators and service delivery providers and individuals and families and support staff who are involved in the person's life on a day-to-day basis have a better understanding of what is important to the person and how to make a decision about what is most important to the person, and if the supports in place are in fact achieving the outcomes most important to the person. And I just want to give a quick example, of how we are thinking of shifting to begin to identify outcomes in a more coordinated way. So right now, a lot of our measurement is about looking at, did a service occur? And in order to get to a point of saying, not just did the service occur, but did the service impact the person's life in a way that helps them achieve the outcome that is most important to them. That's one of the elements that is built into the personal outcome measure process and the ability to make a judgment on whether or not that's being achieved. Now, when we develop the life plan and the expectations for the life plan, it does not require that people use a personal outcome measure interview process. However, at the close of the person-centered planning process, which could include the POMS interview or not, but needs to be a person-centered planning process, the team needs to decide what the goal of the person is and how it relates back to a particular POM area. That way, so you need to have a basic understanding of the CQL POMS in order to make that judgment. You don't need to be certified interviewer, you don't need to be, a trainer of the POMS, but you do need to have an understanding of those basic domain areas and which one is most relevant to the plan, the outcome area of interest to the person in their HAB plan. So what's expected, and you'll see in the life plan, is that those domain areas need to be included as part of the life plan sections that are related to both the safeguard section and the goals, the habilitative goals of the person and the delivery of the services to support those outcomes.
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. If we could just highlight one more time on where the recordings for this presentation can be found and other presentations that are related to the People First Care Coordination.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, the recordings for these will be found on the same page on which you registered or found the registration link on the OPWDD website. If you look to the People First Care Coordination page, on the left menu there is an MSC webinars item on the menu on the left. Just click on there, and all the materials, including the slide decks, the recorded presentations, and upcoming presentations will be posted there. We hope by the next presentation on the 27th to have for you the announcement of the following two presentations that will be scheduled in January. And I think that's kind of the main place where you need to stay in touch.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're so glad you participated today in our first informational session. Hopefully this information was helpful for you, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue, and we'll see you all virtually on December 27th. So thanks again for your time today, and take care.